Hey there. Tonight we're going back to a story you've probably heard 100 times. The Exodus. The journey led by Moses through endless desert, searching for the promised land. You've heard of the manna from heaven, the tablets of stone, the wandering tribes, but not the way it's told in songs or sermons, not the miracles or the plagues. Tonight, you'll hear the quiet version, the one lived in silence, in aching feet and parched lips. Not 40 years of divine purpose, but 40 years of dust, repetition, and quiet survival. You won't hear shouting prophets or parted seas, just the creak of leather, the crunch of sand, and the heavy breath of someone who can't remember where they started or where they're going. A journey not of triumph, but of endurance, of being too tired to ask why. So dim the lights, lie back somewhere comfortable, and let yourself drift into the long, dry rhythm of the wilderness. It's the early morning of a dry spring in the Sinai Desert, around the 13th century BCE. The camp is still half asleep, scattered across hard sand and wind-smoothed rocks, with no walls, no paths, and no end in sight. You wake up to the sound of nothing, no bird song, no rushing water. Just the gentle hiss of wind moving through grit, and the distant creak of someone adjusting their sleeping mat. The sand beneath your ribs is uneven, still cold from the night, but already beginning to warm. Your back aches. Your lips are dry. You don't remember your last dream. It doesn't matter. The blanket, rough, sun-faded, has slipped down your shoulder again, and the night has left a line of salt along your neck. You roll onto your side and pause there, eyes open, watching the pale fabric of the next tent shift softly in the breeze. You know you'll have to get up soon. You know today will be the same. You sit slowly, careful not to stir the ache in your legs too suddenly. The muscles complain, as they always do. Your knees have long since given up the idea of smooth motion. Across the camp, a small group is already tending to the morning fire, poking at last night's embers with hollow eyes. The smoke rises thin and gray into a sky that still holds the last traces of night. There is no call, no signal, just the quiet agreement between bodies that life must continue. You stretch your arms overhead and feel the crack of joints like dry branches. Somewhere, a child is coughing. Somewhere else, a goat bleats once, then goes silent. The rhythm of the camp is the rhythm of breath, constant, low, and without ceremony. You gather your things, a cloth bag with nothing inside, a water skin that may hold 2 swallows at best, and the sandals whose leather has long since molded to your shape. Dust clings to everything, the soles of your feet, your eyelashes, the folds of your tunic. It gathers in the creases of your fingers and lines the edge of your nostrils. You've learned not to fight it. The desert is not cruel. It simply doesn't care. You look to the horizon. It's empty. The same hills of stone and silence that were there yesterday. The same ones that will be there tomorrow. Someone near you mutters a half prayer, but it sounds more like a habit than hope. You don't know if the words are for the day ahead or the day just past. You tie the cloth bag tighter anyway, just in case. You don't speak as you walk toward the center of the camp. No one does. Not this early. Words are saved for necessity. You nod once to an older man, whose beard is streaked with the pale dust of morning. He nods back. That is enough. The people here have long since abandoned the notion of comfort. What's left is motion, walking, stopping, waiting, sleeping. Then again, and again, and again. Perhaps that's faith, or perhaps it's just inertia, too old to break. You take your place near the others, close enough to feel presence, far enough to feel alone. The sun is rising now, not in splendor, just as it always does, without pause or invitation. You close your eyes for a moment longer, not to rest, but to delay the first step. Then, like everyone else, you move. One foot, then the other, and still you endure. In the earliest hours, just before the heat sinks its teeth into the earth, the manna appears. It doesn't fall like rain. It gathers. Thin, pale, stubborn. It clings to rocks and cloth, to footprints from the day before. You don't know how it arrives. No one does. Some say it's a gift. Others no longer bother to guess. It's just there, waiting, like a task. The first time you saw it, you remember a kind of awe, something soft in the harshness. Now your hands move without thought. You crouch low, sweeping the flakes into a worn pouch. They stick to your skin, to each other, a powdery crust with no scent. The first person to speak today will be the one to say how much was gathered. It won't be you. The measure is always the same. Just enough, never more. You chew slowly. The texture is forgettable. Not quite bread, not quite ash. A weightless food that fills the stomach just long enough to avoid collapse. It dissolves as you swallow, leaving behind no aftertaste, no satisfaction, no sense of being nourished. There is no warmth to it, no story, no celebration. It doesn't vary. No spice, no sweetness, no texture to surprise. You eat because there is nothing else. Your teeth move out of habit, not hunger. Around you, others sit in silence doing the same. No one speaks of missing meat or remembering the meals of Egypt. That kind of talk faded years ago. Perhaps it was dangerous. Perhaps it just hurt too much. The act of eating is now just another movement in the body's long list of demands. You chew, you swallow, and you forget you ever had a tongue. Sometimes, you wonder if it's meant to be this way. Food that gives life without giving pleasure. Sustenance that keeps you moving, but never lifts you. You've heard the old ones say that manna tastes sweet to the faithful, but your portion has never changed. It is blank, pure utility. You see a child push their share away once. A hand swats them back into obedience. No one wastes food here, even if it brings no joy. Even if it feels like eating dust soaked in memory. Your fingers are lined with the fine film of it. It gets into your nails, the corners of your mouth. The sun rises higher, and still the taste stays, clinging to the inside of your throat like something half-spoken. There's nothing to wash it down with. The water is rationed. One sip, maybe two, just enough to keep moving. When the meal ends, no one lingers. There are no scraps, no leftovers, no dishes. Only the faint prints of where people knelt, and a few scattered crumbs that will vanish in the wind. You feel no fullness, only the absence of emptiness. That is enough. You stand and dust your hands on your tunic. The powder stays. It always does. The heat is coming now, and with it the day's long tasks. Walking, waiting, lifting, bowing, stopping, beginning again. You don't remember the last time eating brought comfort or surprise. or anything beyond dull repetition. But you will eat again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after, until your legs give out, or the manna stops, or something changes, though nothing ever does. You slide your feet into the same sandals you've worn for years, if they can still be called that. The straps are brittle in places, softened in others. The soles have thinned so much that you feel each rock, each shift of the ground beneath you. They were never made to fit, not really. They were handed to you, passed down, found, shaped by someone else's walk. At first you tried to mold them. You bent the leather, wrapped cloth, tied them tighter, looser. Nothing helped. Now you simply accept it. The sandals are what they are, like the path, like the rules. Your heel slides slightly with each step, rubbing raw a spot that has never fully healed. You no longer check for blood. You know it's there, and that it will dry before the next rest. Your feet have become maps of pain. Blisters layered over blisters, skin that peels in ribbons, toes that no longer straighten without effort. The dirt has pressed itself so deep into the cracks of your heels that they've darkened permanently. When you bathe, on the rare occasion water is spared. You see the grime run in slow, curling threads, but it never fully leaves. Your nails are cracked and chipped. One is missing. The sandals rub at the same place every day, as if the straps have memorized where to cut. You try not to wince anymore. It wastes energy. At night, you sometimes remove them and feel the flesh sigh in quiet agony. But even then, the ache doesn't fade. It just sinks in, joins the background hum of discomfort you carry with you. Others have it worse, you remind yourself. You've seen feet so swollen they barely fit inside the leather. You've seen children trip because the straps are too large or too tight, or tied in ways no foot was meant to tolerate. You've watched a man walk with torn cloth bound around his soles, sandals long discarded, and still he didn't complain. No one does. Pain is not news here. It's weather, expected, daily, discussed only when it interferes with movement. If you limp, someone might notice. If you fall, someone might stop, but only briefly. Then they'll move on. There are no cobblers among you, no new materials. What you have is what you will have tomorrow. You consider cutting new straps from something else once in a while. But then you think of the effort, the failure, and let it go. It wouldn't change anything. When you walk, you adjust your steps by instinct. You shift your weight to avoid pressing on tender spots. You choose smoother ground when you can, though smooth is rare. Rocks blend with sand, and sand hides thorns. You know the patterns of terrain now, which ridges are sharper, which slopes push the foot too far forward in the sandal. Your gait has changed over time, made crooked by necessity. It's a slow, soft lurch, adapted for endurance, not elegance. The sandals slap lightly against the soles of your feet, a rhythm that never quite settles. You've stopped hoping for comfort. You settle for survivable. The path stretches ahead, and your feet carry you forward, one painful step at a time. Not because they're ready, but because stopping hurts just the same. You walk because everyone else walks. The line stretches forward, people moving in clusters or alone, silent or murmuring. The morning light burns flat against the horizon, and no one looks up anymore. No one points. There's no destination in sight. There's no landmark waiting to greet you, no change in the earth or the wind that signals arrival. You were told once that there would be a promised place, a land of something better, greener, softer, with walls and vineyards and water that didn't come in gulps and rations. But that was years ago. The words have dulled. The promise has dulled. What's left is dust, movement, and a memory you're not even sure is your own. You've asked, quietly now and then. Not loudly, never loudly. You've leaned close to someone beside you and whispered, "How will we know when we've arrived?" The answer is always vague. A gesture to the cloud, a shrug. A story passed from a cousin's cousin who once saw a valley, or heard a voice, or dreamed a vision. None of it changes what your feet feel, what your skin knows, that this path could stretch on forever, and no one would be bold enough to stop. To say, "Here, this is far enough." You keep walking because it's what's done. Because stopping would mean looking around and realizing you're nowhere. Just sky and ground and a tired body moving forward. Some say the leaders know that they're guiding you to something, that the cloud in the sky means something, that the signs are clear if you're faithful enough. But when you look at their faces, worn, sun-bitten, lined with doubt, you're not so sure. Even the strongest eyes have a kind of distance to them now, like they're seeing something that isn't there, or choosing not to see what is. You wonder if Moses knows, if he's ever known. He walks far ahead, surrounded by silence, shadowed by stories. But you've never spoken to him, never touched his robe or heard his voice without echo. He feels like part of the desert itself, vast, unanswering, beyond reach. You're told to trust, and you do in the way that a stone trusts the river that wears it down. You sometimes imagine what arrival would even look like. Not the milk and honey, just something still. A place where the walking ends, where your sandals can be untied for good, and your legs can rest without fear of the next march. But you don't know if that place exists. Maybe it was lost. Maybe it was never real. Maybe the point isn't to arrive, but to continue. To stretch the waiting so far that it becomes the only life you know. People are born into this. Children who've never seen a house, a field, a wall that didn't flap in the wind. And still they walk. And still you walk. Not because the destination is near, but because asking, "Where are we going?" would require the energy of belief. And that's something you ran out of a long, long time ago. You feel it in the back of your throat before you even open your eyes. That dull, hollow pull. A dryness that isn't pain exactly, but memory. Of every day before this one. Every morning where your first thought is not hunger or sleep or safety, but thirst. Your tongue presses against the roof of your mouth and finds nothing there. You swallow out of habit and receive only a faint rasp of sand dust. You reach for the water skin beside you, though you already know. It's lighter than it should be. When you lift it to your lips, only a few warm drops reach your mouth, enough to tease, not satisfy. They carry the taste of leather and old rope, more memory than moisture. This is how the day begins again, not with a question, but a reminder. You think of water the way some might think of a lover, longed for, shaped in dreams, remembered in ways it never truly was. You remember streams from your childhood, maybe real, maybe just stories passed around the fire. You remember water that ran clear, that reflected light, that cooled the fingers and filled the belly without worry. None of that belongs to this world. Here, water is not found, it is fought for. carried in clay jugs on tired shoulders, pulled in measured scoops from shared basins, watched like treasure. It smells of stone, of metal, of time. It is never enough. And when it appears, no one asks where it came from or how long it will last. They just move, fill, pass, swallow. And when it disappears, the silence that follows is not panic, but habit. We are used to the vanishing. There are days when your share is just one swallow, others when there is none at all. You've watched grown men lick the insides of empty skins. You've seen a woman press her robe against morning dew, then wring it into a cup. Once you saw a child dig a hole with bare hands, waiting for dampness that never came. No one stopped her. There was nothing to say. You've tasted water so brackish it burned, but drank it anyway. You've cupped your hands to catch runoff from tent flaps during rare rains, holding it as though it were gold. And when someone dies of thirst, it is not a surprise. It is not a lesson. It is just what happens. A mouth dries, a body slows, and eventually the walking stops. The rest of you keep going. There is no room to carry those who fall behind. When the elders say we are being led, that the journey has a purpose, that even the thirst has meaning, you try to believe them. You nod when they speak. You lower your eyes and repeat their words. But the ache in your belly says otherwise. The cracks in your lips speak their own truth. Faith is hard to swallow when the mouth holds nothing. You watch the skies and see no clouds. You feel the wind and find no coolness. You wonder if even the rocks once held moisture, and if so, when they stopped. And still, each day, you carry the empty skin, the hope of a full basin, the habit of rationing. You take small sips and hold them in your mouth before swallowing, not for pleasure, but to trick the body into patience. And when the last drop is gone, you tie the skin shut and walk forward. Not because you believe there will be more, but because thirst is just another part of the journey now. One more thing you've learned not to fight. You feel it long before it rises. The heat lingers from the day before, stored in the ground, in the stones, in the fabric of your shelter. Even the wind carries a weight to it, warm and slow, pressing against your skin like breath from something watching. You step outside and it's already begun. The sky is cloudless, endless, offering no shade, no distraction. The light arrives without beauty, without welcome. It simply appears, heavy, absolute. You glance upward, though you know better, and it stares back. The sun doesn't burn all at once. It tightens. It waits. It watches. As if it's measuring you. As if it remembers every footstep you've taken beneath it, and is not impressed. No one speaks of the sun. That would give it too much power. But everyone feels its gaze. As the day stretches forward, the light becomes sharper. It reflects off every surface, stone, sand, skin. There is no shelter wide enough, no cloth thick enough. Your tunic sticks to your back with a slow dampness that will never fully dry. Your arms redden beneath the sleeves. The tops of your feet, exposed between sandal straps, ache from exposure. Sweat doesn't cool you. It just marks the places where your body is trying and failing to resist. You shift your headscarf to shield your eyes, but the brightness bleeds through. It always does. The sun is not content with the surface. It wants inside. Into your eyes, your skull, the slow corners of your thoughts. You try to ignore it, to focus on movement, on breath, on the sound of sandals dragging over dust. But the sun follows. It waits for you to falter. By midday, there's no escape. The heat wraps around your chest like a weight, and even breathing feels like work. The air trembles with heat. The horizon blurs. The people around you seem distant, outlines flickering in the brightness. Words disappear. No one wants to speak when each breath costs moisture. You watch your own shadow curl beneath you, shrinking to almost nothing. There's a strange kind of shame in it, being reduced by something that does not move, does not speak, but dominates everything. You wonder if this is punishment, if the sun is not a star, but a judge, ancient and patient, passing silent sentence one cracked lip at a time. You've seen stronger people fall under it, collapse, mutter nonsense, forget where they are. No one is immune. No one is protected. You simply endure until it loses interest. And when it finally begins to lower, there is no triumph, no relief. Only a shift in pressure. The light softens, but the heat stays, trapped in your skin, your clothes, your breath. You feel wrung out, not rested. Your bones hum with fatigue. Your eyes sting. Your mouth tastes of salt and dust. You lie down, not because you're safe, but because you've reached the end of what your body can tolerate. The sun will return. It always does. It never misses a day. And deep down, you know it sees you, all of you. Not just your movements, but your thoughts, your doubt, your weariness. You close your eyes and turn away from where it went, as if that might buy you a little time. A few hours without judgment. But even in the dark, its imprint lingers behind your eyelids, bright, quiet, and unblinking. You notice it first in the way someone stops walking. Not dramatically, not with a cry or collapse, just a soft slowing, a hesitation in their step, a gentle tilt of the shoulders as if they're searching for something to lean against and finding nothing. The rest of the line moves forward. No one calls out. No one turns around. You glance sideways, not enough to draw attention, just enough to confirm what you already know. They're not coming with you. Maybe their legs have failed. Maybe their breath has shortened. Maybe they simply don't see the point in the next step. Whatever it is, it's not new. It's not shocking. It happens the way dust settles, quietly, inevitably, without pause. One more body choosing stillness over effort. One more soul too tired to continue pretending there's something waiting ahead. You've seen it before. A young man crumpling beside a rock, face pressed into his arm. An older woman slipping down during a rest and never rising again. A child whose head lolls the wrong way, eyes open but empty. You don't ask what caused it. You don't need to. The causes are always the same. Heat, hunger, thirst, the slow grinding erosion of days stacked atop days. Death here is not a rupture. It's a gentle unthreading. The body unraveling itself stitch by stitch until there's nothing left holding it together. And when it happens, the silence around it is thicker than grief. No wailing, no ceremony. A few eyes might meet. A hand might tighten on a strap, but the feet continue moving. The line doesn't break. There is nowhere to stop. Nowhere safe enough. No time for remembering. Sometimes, someone will cover the body with a blanket or lay stones around it. Not to honor, but to mark. To say, this one is no longer with us, and this is where they stayed. You pass by these shapes with the same reverence you give to rocks or trees, Noticed, acknowledged, but not dwelled on. You've walked past too many to count. They blend with the land now, part of the terrain. The dead don't linger. They don't ask for anything. And those who remain learn quickly that mourning is a luxury the desert doesn't afford. You can't carry loss and water at the same time. So you carry water. You carry packs. You carry the weight of breath and keep moving. Grief is quiet here because noise takes energy, and energy is survival. At night, you lie beside others who are breathing, for now. You don't know which of them will wake, which will slip quietly into the stillness that waits just beneath the surface. You don't speak of it. You don't ask. If someone is missing in the morning, you look once, then look away. You wrap your sandals, lift your pack, and fall into step like always. There is no ledger, no list of names etched in stone, just the memory of faces that fade more quickly than they should. And yet, somewhere beneath the tired skin and hollow bones, you carry each one with you. Not in stories, but in silence. Not in tears, but in footsteps. The dead do not call back, but you remember them in the way you endure. You remember them by continuing, by moving forward when stopping would be easier. They ask in the early hours, when the air is still cool and their feet have not yet begun to ache. They ask while walking, in the quiet stretches between camps, when the grown-ups are too tired to talk, but too awake to stop thinking. Their voices are small, but persistent, cutting through the silence like dry grass brushing against your ankles. Why are we still walking? Where are we going? When will we get there? You hear the questions, always just behind you or to the side, like insects circling the same wound. They ask because they haven't yet learned not to. They haven't yet absorbed the rhythm of silence, the way older bodies do. Their questions are soft, almost curious, but they carry the weight of something deeper. Doubt, hunger, the ache of being born into movement with no end in sight. You don't answer, not because you're cruel or impatient or unkind, but because you have nothing to give them. The words have dried up in you, just like the wells, just like the springs you were promised would appear. You used to say things, simple things. Soon. We're almost there. Be patient. But each answer dissolved a little more truth from your mouth. Each answer made your voice thinner. And now, silence feels more honest. You shift your pack and pretend not to hear. You look toward the cloud in the distance, the same one you've been following for what feels like your whole life, and pretend that it still means something. The child walks beside you for a moment longer, then drops back, or skips ahead, or asks someone else. You keep your eyes forward. If they press, you say, "Ask your mother," or "Ask the elders." But the mothers don't know, and the elders are tired. At night, when the camp settles and the sky turns black and sharp with stars, they ask again. Around the fire, between bites of tasteless food, in the soft nest of blankets laid over hard earth. Why did we leave? What was Egypt like? Did you see the sea open? You've heard these questions in so many voices, from so many mouths, that they start to blend. You nod sometimes, or murmur a word, or close your eyes and pretend sleep. Some parents tell stories, bright ones, shaped for comfort, but you've seen the flicker in their eyes, the effort, the lies wrapped in rhythm. You don't blame them. There are worse things than lies. You've told your share, but now the stories feel like dried leaves. Crumble them and they turn to dust. The children still believe, and maybe that's enough. Maybe their belief is what carries the camp forward, even when the adults can no longer pretend. There's a boy who walks with you sometimes, maybe 7 or 8, barefoot more often than not. He doesn't ask much, just watches. But one day he looks up and says, "Do you think we'll ever stop?" You almost answer. The words reach the back of your throat, but they don't pass your lips. You don't know what they would be if they did. Instead, you look at him. Really look. His hair is matted, his face streaked with dust, but his eyes are wide, clear, too young for what he's already seen. You want to tell him something true. That no, you don't think so. That maybe the walking never ends. But you don't. You just squeeze his shoulder, gentle and slow, then keep walking. He stays close for a while, then drifts away. The question lingers behind you, unspoken, unfinished, and unbearably familiar. And still, you have no answer. Because some truths are too heavy for children, and some are too heavy for you. You never know when it will shift. The sky might be blank for hours, dull and motionless, the same pale blue pressing down on your back as you rest, or eat, or mend a strap, in silence. And then someone sees it. A tilt of the head, a murmur passed from mouth to mouth, like wind moving through tents. The cloud has moved, just a little, east or north, or somewhere not here. That's all it takes. No horn, no command, no great voice from above, just a small drift in the air, and suddenly the camp begins to stir. Blankets are folded, water skins checked. The fires go out. The silence deepens. You stand and tighten your belt, not because you're ready, but because you must. The cloud doesn't wait for readiness. It moves, and so must you. You don't ask where it's going. You used to once. In the first months, or maybe the first years, it's hard to tell anymore. You wondered if it led to something specific. A land, a home, a place with softer ground, cooler air, water that didn't taste like coins. But now, the cloud is just a sign, not a promise, not even a guide, just the next motion. You look up at it, floating too high to touch, and you can't help but feel small. It never speaks, it never wavers. You've followed it through valleys and hills, across cracked stone and wind-blown flats. You've watched it in the morning sun and under blood-colored dusk, and it has never changed for you. It drifts, that's all. And you chase it. Not with joy, not with hope, but because staying behind would feel like dying on purpose. Some people talk about it still. They say it's sacred, that it means the presence is near, that it watches, that it knows. You listen sometimes, but their words fall soft, like dust. You've seen too much to believe in symbols. You've walked too far to attach hope to vapor. The cloud is not cruel. It simply doesn't care. It moves through the sky like it doesn't even know you're there. And yet, it controls everything. No one questions it. Not because they trust it, but because they've forgotten how not to follow. The cloud is motion. The cloud is the rhythm of your body, your days, your silence. When it moves, your feet move. When it stops, your bones collapse. It governs not with orders, but with inevitability. You obey because there is no alternative. And so you walk, again and again. You lift the pack that cuts into your shoulders, pull the cloth over your face to keep the dust from your teeth, and fall into line with the others. The cloud drifts ahead, white against the burning blue. You don't watch it anymore. You've learned not to. The less you look, the less it hurts to follow. It is not a question. It is not a gift. It is just the sky moving, and your life moving with it. You feel the heat rise, the ache settle back into your knees, the slow press of time without form. You wonder if the cloud even knows how long it's been, how many footsteps it's gathered behind it. You wonder if it cares, but the wondering fades quickly. There are too many rocks ahead, too many hours left. The cloud keeps moving, so do you. At night, the fire is lit not out of need, but out of habit. The cold has already begun to settle into the backs of your arms, into the backs of your knees. The heat from the day vanishes the moment the sun sinks, as if the warmth was borrowed and has now been called back. The fire crackles softly, its light trembling over worn faces and hollow eyes, but it doesn't reach your skin. You sit near it anyway. Everyone does. Not because it offers comfort, but because it marks a center, something to gather around. Even if gathering feels more like survival than company. You stretch your hands toward it, knowing there's no relief coming. The flame dances without heat, like it's only pretending. But still, you keep your hands there. Still, you pretend with it. You watch the fire and think of other fires, ones you've only heard about or imagined. Fires in stone hearths, fires in cities, fires that warmed the bones of people who had roofs and walls and places to leave their shoes. The stories used to say that fire was sacred, that it was a gift. Now it feels more like a mirror. It flickers, it fades. It leaves behind ash and the smell of something lost. No one speaks much around it anymore. Once there were songs, laughter even. Now the voices are low, if they come at all. The fire casts shadows on faces that have forgotten how to soften. You look across the glow and see people you've walked beside for years, and they feel as distant as strangers. The fire is supposed to bring you together, but it only reminds you of how far apart you've all become. You shift on the hard ground, drawing your cloak tighter, trying to trap some of your own breath for warmth. The fire doesn't help. It never does. It burns because someone lights it, because someone remembers how, because the movement of striking flint and feeding kindling has become as essential as walking. You don't know who tends it most nights. It just appears, like the manna, like the cloud, like the rituals no one believes in but no one forgets. Sometimes children stare into it, their eyes wide as if looking for something. Answers, comfort, stories. But the fire gives none of these things. It gives only light, and even that feels thin. Still, you watch. You sit beside it as long as you can before the cold drives you down to the mat, to the same cramped posture you'll hold until dawn. The fire keeps burning, and still your fingers go numb. And when it dies, as all fires must, it does so without protest. The glow dims. The air grows heavier. The ashes settle like gray snow across the stones. Someone might stir the embers, but only half-heartedly. The warmth never came, and no one really expected it to. You close your eyes with the fire still flickering at the edge of your vision, a final shimmer before the dark takes everything. It wasn't built to warm you. Not truly. It was built to remind you that you're still alive. That there's still motion, still breath, still a spark left in bodies too tired to remember why they rise each morning. The fire doesn't speak. It doesn't promise. But it burns, quietly, like a heartbeat you can't feel but know is there. And that is enough, for now. It doesn't begin with screams. It begins with coughing, small, dry, unremarkable, a rasp in the throat of someone you've walked beside for weeks, maybe months. You hear it during rest, during meals, even during the slow, shuffling marches between camps. You try not to notice. So do they. But the cough grows sharper, deeper, wetter. Then others start, one by one, always scattered, never loud. You pretend it's the dust or the cold or nothing at all. But then someone doesn't get up in the morning, and then another. And the silence thickens. You don't talk about it. No one does. There are no words to soften what you know. Something has returned. Not a beast with teeth or claws. Just breath turned wrong. Skin gone pale. Eyes dulling like cooling embers. You keep walking. There's no announcement, no law, no sign from the sky. But the camp adjusts. People stop touching as much. Food is passed with more space between fingers. Some wrap their faces, not for dust, but for hope. The ones who fall ill are moved to the edges, gently, almost kindly. No shouting, no panic, just separation. As if by keeping them further away, you might trick the wind into forgetting. You pass them sometimes, a glimpse of a blanket, a bowl of untouched water, a face turned to stone. They don't cry out. Most don't speak at all. And when they die, it's not a moment. It's a disappearance. Their bodies vanish before sunrise, taken without ceremony. A few stones, a quiet nod. Then the space they left is filled with someone else. The line keeps moving. You try not to think of the ones you knew. The names that once felt heavy on your tongue now slip away. There was a boy with a chipped front tooth, always running. A woman who hummed to herself when she cooked. A man who made sandals out of rope. They're gone now. No one says their names. No one marks the days. Death has no memory here. You don't ask where the sickness comes from, whether it's punishment, coincidence, or something in the water. You've learned that questions rarely bring anything but more questions. And so you learn to wait, to breathe smaller, to hope quietly that your chest remains steady, your skin stays dry, your sleep undisturbed. And if not, you hope your body knows how to vanish with the same grace. And just as quietly as it came, it goes. The coughing fades. The blankets are folded. The spaces between bodies close again. A strange, nervous laughter returns, cautious at first. The camp exhales, but not deeply. You all know it can return. It always can. But for now, there's silence again, the familiar kind. You keep your eyes forward. You walk as before. The path is the same. The cloud is the same. The dust, the heat, the weight in your bones, unchanged. Nothing marks that a plague passed through you. Nothing but the missing faces, the quieted memories, and the small relief of waking up still breathing. You don't talk about it. Because what would you say? You survived. Others didn't. And now the air feels no different. It never does. They come down from the mountain slowly at first. A few words carved in stone, spoken in thunder maybe, or whispered through smoke. No one's sure anymore. But they're remembered, repeated, written again and again, not with ink, but with habit. Don't do this, always do that. Wait before eating, wash before touching, step here, not there. On the first day, it all felt like meaning. Now it feels like weight. Each morning, someone announces another instruction, passed from mouth to mouth until it reaches you already softened and tangled. You try to follow. You try to remember. But the days blur, and the rules multiply faster than the sun can rise. You keep track with knots on string, scratches on wood, pieces of bone laid in rows. But the string breaks. The wood burns. The bone scatters. You forget what came first. The laws aren't written for your understanding. They're given, handed down like food, cold, quiet, unquestioned. Someone says this bird is no longer clean. Someone says you must wait 3 days instead of 2. Someone says the fire must burn in silence. You nod because everyone else nods. You practice the gesture of agreement even when your mind remains blank. You want to ask why, but there is no why anymore. There is only what. You whisper the rules to yourself when you wake, like a prayer or a list of injuries. On some days, the rules contradict each other, but no one speaks of it. You adapt, twist, step carefully around the conflict. Your body remembers more than your mind. Your hands know which side of the pot to touch. Your eyes know when not to look. The ritual becomes the rhythm. The rhythm becomes survival. There's a man who used to laugh when new laws came. He doesn't laugh anymore. He sits in silence now, tying small pieces of cloth to a stick in order to remember something. What? He won't say. A woman you know used to repeat the older rules aloud at night, like a bedtime story. She's stopped. Too many changes. Too many corrections. Now she just watches the fire and says nothing. The children ask, "Why can't we eat that anymore?" You shrug. It's forbidden. They ask, "Why can't we light the lamp before the third drumbeat?" You shake your head. Because it must be dark first. You give answers not out of conviction, but exhaustion. It's easier to repeat than to think, easier to obey than to doubt. The laws are not cruel. They are simply endless. And yet, in the middle of it all, you catch glimpses of something else. A hand pausing before completing a ritual, unsure. A look exchanged between two elders when a rule is forgotten. A moment of hesitation before correcting a child's mistake. As if, beneath the layers of certainty, there is still confusion, still weariness, still the quiet, gnawing truth that no one knows how many rules there truly are, or if they matter. But these glimpses pass quickly, buried beneath chants and gestures, nods and compliance. You fold your hands the correct way. You avoid the wrong foods. You walk the approved number of steps. And when a new rule arrives, you accept it. You carve it into your thoughts, even as the old ones fade. You survive through obedience, not clarity. Through repetition, not belief. And so the laws continue, multiplying like dust, like stars, like the days themselves, without end, without pause, without explanation. The pack rests on your shoulders like it always has, heavy, familiar, digging into the same places day after day. It creaks when you shift. The straps chafe the skin where calluses have already formed. Inside it, nothing surprising. A water skin half full, a threadbare cloth, a shard of flint, a folded piece of leather with nothing written on it. These are the things you carry, the visible ones, the ones others can see when you stoop to adjust or open it. But they're not the ones that weigh you down. Not truly. The weight is elsewhere, in the breath you hold without meaning to, in the tightness in your chest that returns each morning, in the way your fingers tremble slightly when you tie the same knots you've tied 100 times before. The pack may sit on your back, but what presses down is not made of cloth or rope. You carry guilt, though you rarely name it. Guilt for surviving when others didn't. For moments when you wished someone else would fall instead of you. For thinking of turning back, even knowing there's nothing to return to. You remember the face of someone who stumbled beside you and didn't get up. You remember not helping. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't want to stop walking. You carry that moment like a stone, tucked deep, unseen, but never absent. And then there's the fear, constant, low, humming under your ribs, fear of thirst, fear of plague, fear that this will never end, fear that it already has, and no one told you. You don't show it. No one does. But it shows itself in the way your eyes avoid meeting others, in the way your voice grows smaller with each passing week. Then there's the doubt. You were told this was a journey of purpose, that something waited at the end of all this. A land, a future, a reason. But every day looks like the one before, and every hill you climb leads only to another stretch of dust. You still say the words, the blessings, the responses. You still bow at the right times. But inside, the silence has grown. The questions echo louder than the prayers. You wonder if anyone else feels it too, if they also go through the motions out of habit, not hope. You've seen it in the faces of others, just for a moment. A blankness behind the eyes, a pause too long between steps. But no one speaks it aloud. To name it would make it real. So you carry it. All of it. Without straps, without containers, just under the skin. And yet somehow, you keep moving, with all of it. With the doubt, the fear, the guilt stacked beside the food and cloth and tools. You rise each morning and lift it all without ceremony. Your body has adjusted. Your mind has learned to bear more than it ever expected to. No one thanks you. No one notices. Because they, too, are carrying. You see it in their posture, in the way their shoulders slump, not from weight, but from memory. The whole camp moves under the burden of what cannot be seen. A procession of the unspoken, of silent regrets and unanswered questions. And still, you walk. You tie your sandals, you drink your ration, you shoulder the pack, and everything else. And still, you endure. Not because the weight has lessened, but because somehow you've grown strong enough to carry it. You begin looking before the sun has even set. Not because you expect to find anything good, but because you know that waiting only makes it worse. The ground offers no comfort. It never has. You search for a spot where the stones are small enough, where the slope isn't too steep, where the wind doesn't cut so hard across your face. It's always a compromise. One corner of the body pressed into something sharp, one shoulder lower than the other, one hip that sinks into an invisible dip that will leave you limping come morning. You step carefully, testing patches of dirt with the heel of your foot, brushing away debris with the edge of your hand. Sometimes it looks promising. Then you kneel and the heat rises back into your bones from the baked earth, or a thorn breaks the skin through your blanket. You stand and keep looking. You remember softness, vaguely. A mat stuffed with straw. A pile of cloth layered thick enough to dull the shape of the floor beneath. That was another life. Here, the best you can hope for is consistency. A patch of earth that doesn't shift too much in the night. A place with fewer ants, fewer roots, fewer unidentifiable things poking at the backs of your legs. You've learned to sleep in positions that make little sense, curled tightly, with your knees pressed into your chest to avoid the unevenness beneath you. Your body adjusts, but never fully. Every new camp means retraining your limbs to bend around a different set of discomforts. Sometimes you find a flat stone and consider it a gift, even if it's cold and hard. At least it won't shift. At least it's predictable. The others do the same. You watch them shuffle in the half-light, dragging mats, spreading cloaks, muttering under their breath. No one speaks of sleep anymore. It's not a topic of conversation, not something anyone looks forward to. It's a task like any other. You lie down because it's time, because your legs won't hold you up any longer. You close your eyes not out of peace but out of surrender. The night air bites at your fingertips, and you tuck them under your arms. Your shoulder blades press into something uneven, and you try to adjust, but there's nowhere else to go. Every movement risks waking the ache in a new part of your body. You breathe shallowly, trying not to shift too much, hoping your position will be tolerable until morning. It never is. But you hope anyway. By dawn, your back is stiff, your hips sore, your mouth dry from breathing through clenched teeth. You rise not rested, but released. The pain of the ground lifts only when you stand. You stretch slowly, carefully, each joint cracking with protest. There's a mark on your thigh where a stone left its imprint. You'll carry it for the day, until a new mark replaces it tonight. You shake out your blanket, but the dust clings. You fold it anyway. There's no point in complaining. Everyone feels it. Everyone knows. And still, they say nothing. The ground is never soft. The earth does not bend for the tired. And so you adjust. You adapt. You endure. You sleep not because it heals you, but because exhaustion eventually demands it. And when the sun sets again, you will search for another piece of land to lie upon, not because it will be better, but because there is no choice. You hear them at the edges of the camp, just before dawn or long after dark, when most are asleep or pretending to be. Their voices are low, scratchy, the kind that come from throats lined with dust and years. They sit close together, cloaks pulled tightly, knees touching. They don't speak often, and never loudly. But when they do, others notice. The whispers drift through the tents like smoke, curling into ears that were never meant to hear them. You tell yourself it's nothing, just old men remembering, just tired women murmuring half-dreams. But the tone is always the same, measured, slow, carrying something heavier than memory. They speak of Egypt, of what was, of what might have been, of what will never be again. And though they don't say it outright, the meaning settles like grit behind your teeth. This journey will not end for them. The elders don't complain. Not exactly. They know better than to say the wrong thing too clearly. But the cracks show in their pauses, in the way they stop mid-sentence and stare toward nothing, in the way their hands fidget when the cloud moves again. They speak in fragments, half-thoughts, stories that loop back on themselves. "We were promised," one of them says, and then falls silent. Another finishes the sentence days later, as if the conversation had never paused. You've seen the younger ones glance toward them, brows tight, jaws clenched, not in anger, but in fear. Because if the elders lose faith, what's left? They were the ones who told the stories, who led the prayers, who knew the signs. And now they whisper like people waiting for something to end, not begin. You hear them, but you keep your face still. You keep your hands busy. You pretend not to listen. There's an understanding in the camp, unspoken, but solid. You don't question the whispers. You don't repeat them. You let them dissolve into the air like heat at sunset. Everyone agrees, without agreeing, that to acknowledge doubt is to invite collapse. So you nod when the elders speak during the day. You echo the right words. You walk when they walk. But at night, when their voices drop and the truths creep out from between worn teeth, you look away. Some pretend to sleep. Others hum to themselves or move their bedding further off. One man builds his fire a little louder than necessary. Anything to fill the space between the murmurs and your own thoughts. You know what they're saying. Not exactly, but enough. That this isn't what they imagined. That the end is too far. That the path curves in circles. That even faith has a limit. And still, you pretend not to hear. Because if you heard, really heard, you might have to ask the same questions. You might have to look at the days ahead and admit that not all of you will see what was promised. That some will walk forever. That maybe this is the point, not arrival, but endurance. You carry those thoughts like smoldering coals, tucked deep, hidden from the wind. And in the morning, you rise like everyone else. You pack, you lift, you step forward. The elders fall silent again, their whispers spent for now. But their silence says as much as their speech. You glance at them as you pass. They do not smile. They do not wave. But their eyes meet yours for a second too long. And in that moment, you understand each other completely and say nothing. You don't dream often anymore. Most nights are too shallow, too broken by cold or cough or the shifting of someone else nearby. But sometimes, when your body is just tired enough, when the wind has stilled and the ground presses into your bones in just the right way, the dreams return, and they always take you back. Not here, not to the dust or the fire or the endless line of walking shapes. They take you to Egypt, not the Egypt of whips and walls and commands barked in another language, but the Egypt your stomach remembers. Cool water running between reeds, garlic sliced into lentils, onions sizzling in hot oil. Your teeth bite into something soft and full and hot, and for a moment you are full again, not just with food, but with something like safety, something like belonging. You wake before you swallow. You always wake before you swallow. You lie there afterward, eyes open in the dark, your tongue pressing against the back of your teeth, trying to find the flavor that's already gone. It lingers for a moment, phantom salt, phantom sweetness, then fades, replaced by the dryness in your mouth and the familiar crack at the corner of your lips. You don't speak of the dreams. No one does. Not because they're forbidden, but because they're dangerous in a different way. They make the air feel too still. They make the present too loud. You glance at the others, sleeping or pretending to, and you wonder if they've also dreamt of cucumbers, of soft bread, of cold jars of beer. You suspect they have. The past has a way of sneaking in when the body stops guarding itself. It tastes better when it's no longer real. During the day, you try not to think of it. But something always brings it back. The smell of heated stone that almost reminds you of baked clay. The way someone slices a piece of dried root. And for a second, you think it might be fresh. The sound of water, distant, always imagined. You swallow nothing and pretend it's soup. You chew on silence and tell yourself it once was meat. Memory becomes a second hunger, quieter than the first, but harder to satisfy. You start to wonder if Egypt was ever real, or just a place stitched together by your body's cravings and your mind's exhaustion. But then you remember the faces, the walls, the rhythm of work and rest. It was real. Even the pain was real. But now all that remains are fragments, floating in sleep, landing behind your eyes when you least expect them. And still, each night, you close your eyes and hope the dreams return. Not because they're pleasant, but because they are different. Because for a few slow breaths, you are somewhere else, somewhere with flavor, somewhere with color, somewhere with more than survival. You dream not of milk or honey, not of promises or futures. You dream of what you knew, of what your tongue knew, of what your fingers touched and didn't have to ration. And when you wake, sore and dry and hungry, you hold on to the last taste as long as you can. You let it sit on your tongue like a prayer you're not allowed to say aloud. You pack your things. You tie your sandals. You walk forward into the day's heat. But deep in your throat, garlic still lingers, soft and impossible. And you don't tell anyone, because they already know. It didn't start that way. In the early days, there were voices, so many voices, shouting instructions, calling names, singing together in waves that rose and fell like the rhythm of a tide. There were chants by the fires. Recitations passed from elder to child, clapping hands, keeping time with marching feet. There were arguments, too, over water, over rest, over memory. Even grief had sound then, wails that split the air and made others pause. Back then, the noise felt like proof that you were alive, that something was happening, that movement meant meaning. But noise burns out. It doesn't sustain. And one by one, the voices dimmed, the songs faded, the prayers thinned into murmurs, then into private thoughts. The last argument you remember happened weeks ago, or was it months? Now, the most common sound is footsteps, not even loud ones, just the soft repetition of people moving forward, and nothing else. The silence creeps in slowly, so you hardly notice it at first. It fills the spaces between footsteps, between breaths, between glances. It wedges itself into pauses that used to be filled with casual words. It settles in the pauses after a child's question goes unanswered. It hangs in the air when the fire burns too low to crackle. And eventually, it becomes the only thing you can count on. You lie down at night and hear it pressing in on all sides. You wake up and hear it clinging to the edges of morning. It follows you, wraps around your head like a scarf too tightly wound. You try to make small sounds to push it back. A cough, a whispered name, a shuffle of cloth. But nothing stays. The silence is larger. It absorbs everything. You start to feel as though even your heartbeat is too loud. You watch the others. They speak less, too. Some have stopped altogether, their mouths now used only for eating, drinking, breathing. You wonder if they're doing the same as you, measuring their voice against the silence and finding it too thin, too breakable. Even the elders are quieter now, their stories told with fewer words, their judgments given in looks. The children, once a constant hum of laughter and whining and questions, have grown still. They observe, learning from what's not said more than from what is. There are no more songs, not even for the rituals. The fire is lit in quiet. The walking begins in quiet. Even grief, when it comes now, is silent. A bowed head, a hand held tightly for a moment, then let go. You start to believe that silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the sound that waits underneath everything, patient and wide and always listening. And the strangest part is that you begin to need it. You crave it, in a way. The silence becomes familiar, safer than words, more stable than memory. You find yourself resenting noise when it does return. A raised voice grates like a stone in your sandal. A burst of laughter feels wrong, as if it's come from some other world. You begin to speak only when you must. You answer in gestures when possible. You learn the new language, the tilt of the head, the slow exhale, the shared glance. You hear more now in the way someone lifts their pack, or sits down, or stops walking. And in the quiet, something else stirs. Not peace, not comfort, but a strange kind of understanding. This is who you are now. This is what the journey has made you. And even if the songs returned, even if the prayers thundered again, you're not sure you'd join them. You've learned to live with the silence. You've let it into your bones. And now, when you close your eyes, it's the only sound you hear. You lift your head toward the sound without realizing you've done it. It's instinct now. The slightest rustle of air, the faintest shift in pressure, and your ears sharpen as if something might finally arrive. A voice, maybe. A message. A change. But it's only the wind again, dragging across the ground like a tired traveler, lifting thin clouds of dust and memory. It whistles low between rocks, brushes against the edge of tents, slips through folds of cloth. You listen harder, just in case, but it brings nothing. No answer, no word, no omen. You stare across the horizon, eyes squinting into distance, hoping something will rise or fall or shift. But the wind keeps moving, and everything else stays still. You tell yourself not to hope for signs, but still, you listen. There was a time when the wind meant something, when people said it carried voices from the mountain, or warnings, or blessings hidden in the air. You remember the way the elders used to tilt their heads when it passed, eyes half closed, lips moving silently, as if interpreting something too subtle for others to hear. You imitated them once, sat still and tried to feel the meaning in the breeze. But that was early in the journey, when the days were fewer and belief came easier. Now the wind only feels like erasure. It smooths footprints. It covers graves. It steals breath. You wrap your face to keep it from stinging your eyes, and still, it finds its way through the cloth, dry and indifferent. You don't speak of it anymore. It's just weather, just movement, just another thing that happens without purpose. Sometimes, when the wind picks up in the night, it wakes you from half sleep. You lie there, listening to the tent fabric strain and snap, to the hiss of sand against sand. In those moments, you imagine a message hidden in it, a name whispered, a memory pulled from long ago and carried back to you. You hold your breath, as if quieting your body might help you hear better. But all it offers is noise, soft, formless, eternal, like it's been blowing across this desert long before you arrived, and will keep blowing long after you're gone. You think of the names that have already faded, of the stories that were once told but now feel distant even in your own voice. You wonder if the wind is collecting them, keeping them, carrying them somewhere else, or simply scattering them until nothing is left. When the wind dies down, it leaves behind silence and grit. The air settles, and the dust clings to your skin, your clothes, your teeth. There's no sign that it was ever here, except the new layer of dirt across your mat and the sting in your throat. You shake out your blanket and cough into your elbow. Around you, others do the same. No one mentions the wind. No one asks what it brought, because they know the answer already. Nothing. It brought nothing. It never does. You rise, adjust your pack, and prepare for another day exactly like the one before. Still, your ears stay tuned for it. Still, your eyes flick toward the distance when a gust begins. You no longer believe the wind will bring you news, but part of you listens anyway, not out of faith, but out of habit. Because sometimes listening is the only thing you have left. You try to remember once just to test yourself, not the day or the month. Those were lost long ago. But the year it began, the year you left, the year someone said it would all be over soon. But the number won't come. It hovers just out of reach, like a word you've heard 1,000 times but never needed to say aloud. You count seasons instead. The number of winters that weren't cold enough. The number of summers that scorched your eyelids. You count deaths. You count blankets worn through. But not years. Time has thinned, stretched out into something shapeless. There are no calendars, no markers, no celebrations to divide one period from the next. Just walking, resting, walking again. You ask someone near you how long it's been. They shrug. They say, "Long enough?" You nod. It's the only answer that fits. Once, people used to argue about the date. You remember it dimly. Elders with cracked voices debating whether it had been 2 years or 3. Someone insisting they'd marked each new moon with a stone. Someone else saying the count was off because of the sickness, the famine, the days when no one moved. But those arguments stopped. The stones were scattered. The memories blurred. Even the most stubborn voices grew quiet. Now, time is measured in sandals worn through and children grown tall. You see a boy run ahead and realize you remember when he was carried. That's how you know years have passed. Not from numbers, but from weight. The way a face changes. The way someone's back begins to curve. The way your own reflection in still water feels like someone you once knew but can't quite place. There are still those who try. One man carves marks into the edge of his staff. Another scratches lines onto the underside of his sleeping mat. They do it for themselves, not for others. No one checks their work. No one corrects them. You wonder what they'll do when the space runs out. When there's no more wood or cloth or skin left to record with. Some keep track through stories. That happened the year the rains came, or it was the same season the sky turned red. But even those blur, bend, contradict. One person says it was before the fire. Another swears it was after. In the end, the only thing everyone agrees on is that it's still happening. Still going. Still not over. Time has become a place. A dry plain with no borders, no signs, no end. And maybe that's the point. If you remembered the year, you might start asking why it hasn't ended. You might begin to count how long you've been waiting, how many steps you've taken, how many promises have faded into silence. Forgetting is easier. It lets the days slide past without judgment. It lets the mornings feel less like failure. You wake and it's not the 10th year, or the 40th, or the 1st. It's just another morning. You walk and it's not progress or delay, it's motion, that's all. The cloud moves, you follow, the dust rises, you breathe it in. Somewhere buried in your bones, the old numbers still live. But you've stopped asking them to come forward. You no longer need to know what year it is, only whether you can still walk tomorrow, and the day after that, and the one after that. You see him sometimes, far ahead, framed against the rocks or outlined by firelight. Always surrounded, never alone. There are men who walk close to him, who carry messages, who nod solemnly when he speaks. You watch from a distance, never near enough to hear the words. You're told they are important, that they are commands, revelations, warnings. But none of them ever reach you directly. They pass down like water through too many hands, evaporated, altered, half-remembered. Someone near you says, "He says we stop tomorrow." Someone else says, "No, we walk." And you believe whichever answer requires less energy. You don't ask what he says anymore. You used to. Now you just watch his figure disappear behind the next rise and remind yourself that you're not meant to understand. You're meant to follow. That's enough. Or at least it has to be. When he climbs the mountain, no one moves. They say he's speaking with something greater. They say the wind up there is different. They say his face shines when he returns. But you've never seen it. You only see the shadow of his robe as he's helped down, the way he shields his eyes, the silence that falls over those around him. They look changed, but not in ways you can name. They walk differently for a while, speak more softly, bow more deeply. Then, slowly, they return to normal, and you wonder if they ever really understood what he said, or if they just wanted to. You hear phrases sometimes, carved words, sacred orders, but they feel like stone in your mouth. Heavy, cold, too large to swallow. So you let others carry the meaning. You carry the packs. There's reverence, yes. People speak of him as chosen, set apart, holy. And you believe it, in a way. Not with passion, but with exhaustion. It would be harder not to believe. Harder to think this whole journey depends on a man who's just a man. So you let him be more. You let him climb the rocks and speak with the sky. You don't envy him. His burden is different. But sometimes, in the quiet, you wonder if he even knows you exist, if he's ever seen your face, if your footsteps matter in the great story he's telling to the mountaintop. You walk, and you obey, and you bow when others bow. But inside you feel like a shadow walking behind a shadow, not forgotten, just never truly seen. And still, when his voice rises, carried faintly on the wind, you stop and listen, not because you expect to understand, but because it feels like something is happening, something that might reach you eventually. You catch only fragments, a name, a number, a warning. You hold them in your mind like broken pottery, trying to piece them together into something whole. But they never fit. So you move on. You tie your sandals. You adjust your pack. You follow the cloud. Moses speaks, but not to you. And maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Maybe your part is just the walking, the enduring, the silence between his words. And so you carry on, not because the message is clear, but because the path continues, and that is all you need. The sun sinks slowly, drawing long lines across the dust. Shadows stretch like arms too tired to lift themselves, dragging behind tents, behind stones, behind your legs as you walk. The heat doesn't fade so much as shift, slipping from the top of your head to the back of your neck, to your lower spine. You watch your own shadow flicker on the uneven ground and wonder, without knowing why, if it's thinner than it used to be. The longer the day becomes, the more brittle your thoughts feel. Your mouth tastes of dryness, your skin of dust, your mind of repetition. You don't speak, no one does. The silence is not heavy, just settled. A shared weariness, the kind that grows quietly, like mold in corners no one looks at. And in the middle of it, something else thins, something you once held tightly, but now keep tucked away, like a crumpled piece of paper you can't bring yourself to read again. There was a time when belief burned hot, when stories felt close, when words like promise and deliverance still rang in your chest with some kind of shape. But that time is further now, blurred by footsteps and sleep and years you no longer count. The longer you walk, the fainter it becomes. Not gone, just dulled. Like a sound from another tent you can almost hear, but not quite understand. You still say the words. You still bow when the others bow. But the feeling isn't there, not the way it once was. You repeat the phrases more like habits now, like the way you tie your sandals, the way you pack your things, the way you lift one foot and then the other. It's muscle memory, not spirit. It gets you through the day, but some days it doesn't even do that. You see it in the faces around you. They still speak of signs. They still point to the cloud, to the fire, to the mountains in the distance. But their voices are lower, their eyes less sure. The children ask fewer questions. The elders answer with less weight. And when someone stumbles, when someone breaks down quietly by the side of the path, no one says it's a test anymore. They just help, or don't, and keep walking. Faith is not a fire now. It's an ember, a dull glow. You carry it not because it gives you light, but because it's what you've always carried. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe it's just easier than letting it go. Easier to hold it like a stone in your pocket. Uncomfortable but familiar. And so you walk through shadows that keep growing, through evenings that come sooner and stay longer. You tell yourself that morning will bring something new, even if you don't believe it. You whisper words you don't feel, hoping they'll mean something again someday. But mostly, you're just quiet. Not from anger, not from despair, just from emptiness. From the slow erosion of believing something would happen and learning one day at a time that maybe it won't. You don't curse. You don't rebel. You simply adjust. You lower your expectations until there's nothing left to lower. And still, you rise. Still, you walk. Still, you endure. Not in faith, but in motion. Because that's what remains when belief fades. The footsteps, the dust, the silence, and the shadow that follows you, always longer than it was the day before. You used to stop when you saw them. A hand curled into dust. A piece of rib half covered in sand. The curve of a jawbone picked clean and silent. You used to feel something in your stomach. A twist, a pause, the cold realization that someone had once lived where only the remains now sat. You used to ask who they were, how long they'd been there, why no one had buried them properly. You used to look around and wonder if anyone else noticed. Most did. Some crossed themselves, some whispered, some walked faster. But eventually, the bones stopped being rare. They showed up more often. Along the side of the path, tucked beneath rocks, pressed into dry creek beds. The journey kept going, and the bones stayed behind. And over time, you learned not to stop. Now you see them the way you see everything else, shapes in the landscape, pale and brittle like roots, like trash, like something left out too long. Your foot hesitates only slightly, more out of balance than emotion. Sometimes you step over a rib cage and don't even glance down. Sometimes you hear the crunch beneath someone else's heel and don't react. There are too many now. Too many to grieve. Too many to name. Some of them are animals, goats, birds, nameless creatures who wandered too far from the camp. Some of them are not. You don't always want to know which is which. You've seen a child pause, crouch down, and touch a skull with both hands as if it might speak. No one told him to stop. No one said anything at all. He got up, wiped the dust from his palms, and kept walking. They become part of the rhythm. Bones between rocks. Bones under your mat at night. Bones used to prop up a leaning tent when no better stake could be found. You've seen someone sharpen a fragment into a tool. You've seen someone thread a string through a hollow piece and wear it without irony. You don't find it disrespectful. There's no ceremony left. Only necessity. And the desert does not complain. It takes what it's given, breaks it down, and returns it to you as something else. You've come to understand that even memory has weight, and some things must be left behind to keep walking. The dead don't speak, but they do remain. Quiet reminders scattered across the path, saying only, "You were here, and now you are not." And so you continue, stepping over what once would have stopped you cold. You've forgotten how many you've seen. You no longer feel shame about forgetting. Forgetting is part of surviving. You feel the shape beneath your sandal and do not flinch. You feel the wind stir the dust and know it will cover whatever's exposed by nightfall. Someone will die today. Someone else will step over them tomorrow. This is the shape of the journey now, not marked by milestones but by bones, not by destination but by what is left behind. You don't speak of it. You don't need to. Everyone already knows, and no one says a word. You used to close your eyes and ask for something more, not loudly, not like the ones who lifted their arms and cried out into the sky, but quietly, in your own breath. A little water, a little shade, a sign that someone, somewhere still saw you. In the early days, that kind of hope felt natural. You believed things might change, that the cloud would stop over fertile ground, that the next morning would bring softness, that something would fall from above, not just food, but mercy. You whispered these wishes before sleep, as if the darkness made them easier to carry. But slowly, without ever deciding, you stopped. The words faded from your mouth. Not because you were angry, not because you lost faith, but because you learned that waiting for miracles only made the emptiness feel larger. Now you move through each day with lower expectations, not bitter ones, just manageable. You wake and hope your feet will hold you. You hope the sun will burn a little less than it did yesterday. You hope the firewood isn't soaked with dew. You don't ask for relief. You ask for nothing worse. And when nothing worse comes, it's almost like a blessing. You drink your ration without ceremony. You chew your food without complaint. You listen to the silence without needing it to speak back. The word miracle doesn't come to mind anymore. It's too heavy, too distant, too sharp around the edges. The stories still circulate, old ones, about seas that opened and plagues that passed over, but they feel like someone else's memories, not lies, just far away. Like looking at firelight from the back of the camp and knowing it won't reach you. There are those who still believe. You hear them sometimes, muttering blessings over stones, laying hands on strangers, raising their faces to the sky with that same hunger in their eyes. You don't mock them. You understand them. You once were them. But now, when you see someone praying, you feel something else, not shame, not envy, just distance, as if they live on a quieter road that runs parallel to yours but never touches it. You pass them with a nod and keep walking. You don't ask what they're asking for. You don't want to know, because if it doesn't come, it will break them. And if it does, it will feel like something you no longer recognize. You don't pray for rain anymore. You just hope the wind doesn't carry too much dust. And still, you continue. Step by step. Not in search of something greater, but because movement itself is a kind of survival. You endure the day. You lie down at night. You rise again. The pattern becomes its own kind of rhythm, one that requires no miracles, only endurance. You still remember how to speak the words, if someone asked. You still know the prayers by heart, but they live in your mouth now like dry leaves, crackling and brittle. You hold on to smaller things, the warmth of a blanket that isn't torn, the rare silence when no one coughs, the way the sky glows just before morning. These are not miracles. They are moments. And sometimes, they're enough. You no longer wait for the sea to part. You only hope the ground beneath your feet will hold for one more day. You walk beside them every day. You know their backs, the way their feet strike the ground, the rhythm of their breath when the path grows steep. You've shared food with them, traded places in line, sat beside them in the fading light when no one felt like speaking. But you don't know their stories. Not really. You don't know who they were before the walking started, or what they left behind, or who they still think about when the nights are too long. You don't know if they had brothers, or gardens, or names they haven't spoken in years. You don't ask. No one does. There are stories here, yes, but they stay sealed, like clay jars no one wants to break open. The words are there, but they're packed away beneath blankets and dust and silence. There are moments when something slips through, a glance held too long, a name murmured in sleep, the way someone stares at a certain shape in the distance, as if it reminds them of a door, a wall, a tree they haven't seen in a decade. You notice and you wonder, but you don't ask. Not because you're cold, but because you've learned that memory is dangerous. You've seen someone speak too much and then grow quiet for days after, like they'd bled out something they couldn't put back. You've felt it yourself, the way a single thought can unbalance you, pull you out of the rhythm you've worked so hard to keep. And so you keep your questions to yourself. You nod, you share the silence, and you pretend the only story that matters is the one beneath your feet, moving forward, always forward. You have your own story too, one that once felt clear, shaped, worth telling. but it's faded now, blurred by dust and repetition. You remember certain moments, the sound of your mother's voice, the weight of a bowl in your hand, the color of a roof at sunset. But the lines don't connect anymore. The story has no ending, no audience, no reason to be told. Sometimes you whisper it to yourself, just to remember how the words feel. Sometimes you forget entire parts and don't bother to recover them. You're not ashamed of your story. You're just tired of carrying it on the surface. You've tucked it deep inside, next to the things you don't show: doubt, longing, the sharp ache that comes when you think of what you've lost. You carry it in silence like everyone else. And so the camp moves forward. Hundreds of bodies, hundreds of stories, none of them told. You look around and know that behind every blank expression is a life full of detail, color, and sound. But no one shares. There's no space for storytelling here. No room for remembering too much. You sleep beside strangers whose names you never learn, and who never learn yours. You pass people who might once have saved your life, or nearly ended it, and you nod as if nothing passed between you. This is how it works. This is how the story survives. By staying unwritten. By living not in the mouth, but in the walk. Not in words, but in endurance. Everyone has a story. But here, where the days repeat and the sky never changes, the telling would only make it harder. So you walk in silence, carrying a past no one sees, and that somehow is enough. It was a word they gave you early. Promised. The promised land. You remember how it sounded then. Full of light, of certainty, of softness. You could feel even as your feet bled. You pictured it sometimes. Fields that needed no tending, homes already waiting, water that ran without cost. The stories shaped it into something more than a place. It was meaning. It was destination. It was why your legs kept moving, why your back kept lifting, why your silence held steady. But over time, the word began to change. Not suddenly, just a little more hollow each time someone said it, a little more forced in the mouths of the ones still repeating it. And then one day, when you heard someone say it, you didn't feel anything at all. Just a quiet ache, like realizing a melody you once loved now makes no sound. It still comes up, of course, in speeches, in whispered reassurances, in the mouths of the hopeful and the weary alike. We're almost there. It's just ahead. He promised. You nod, the way you've learned to nod, and say nothing. Because what would you say? That the promise feels like a joke now? That if it exists at all, it has buried itself so far behind the heat and the hunger and the years that you wouldn't recognize it if you arrived tomorrow? You don't say it out loud, but you feel it. When you wake up to sand in your eyes, when you watch someone collapse beside the path, when your body aches in places you never knew could ache. You feel it most when someone new joins the group, still full of belief, still speaking of arrival like it's just around the bend. You listen, and then you look away. There's a cruelty in hope when it stretches too far, when it becomes not a lantern, but a leash. You start to wonder if the promise was meant to be fulfilled at all, or if it was always just a way to keep you moving. A distant goal to distract you from the pain in your knees, a shape on the horizon you'll never quite reach. You hear the old phrases still, that the land flows with milk and honey, that it waits for the faithful. But all you know is dryness. All you know is dust. You try to picture it, and your mind offers only emptiness. an open space with no edge. And in that space you feel very small, like something uncounted, like a speck of sand in a wind that doesn't care where you land, and still you move forward. Not because you believe in the promise, but because belief has been replaced by something simpler: habit, momentum, the refusal to stop. You've walked too far to turn back, even if you wanted to. You've given too much. You've buried too many. The promise doesn't feel like a gift anymore. It feels like something that was used up long ago and keeps being spoken of only because silence would admit too much. You don't hate it. You just don't trust it. And when you close your eyes at night, you don't dream of arrival. You dream of stillness, of not having to take another step, of lying down on ground that doesn't push back. And if that is the promise, then maybe you've already reached it. Maybe this is all it ever was. A path that never ends, a hope that slowly becomes a burden, and a people who keep walking anyway. The ground was harder than you expected. Not solid, not rocky, just stubborn. Dry earth that broke in chunks, refusing to yield. You dug with your hands at first, then with whatever you could find. A shard of wood, a curved stone, the edge of a bent bowl. You didn't say anything while you worked. No one did. There were 2 of you, maybe 3. The others stood back, eyes low, silent in a way that felt less like reverence and more like retreat. The body lay nearby, wrapped in cloth that had once been part of a tent wall. You recognized the shape beneath it. You knew the hand that had held yours a week before. But now you focused on the dirt, the depth, the rhythm of moving earth aside. When it was done, you lowered them gently, or maybe quickly. You don't remember anymore. Only that the wind picked up before you finished, and the sand began to fill the edges before the last rock was placed. Now, when you pass that place, you recognize it before anyone else. A slight rise in the ground, a line of darker stones, a strip of fabric bleached almost white by the sun. You don't pause. You don't slow your steps. Your eyes brush past it the same way they brush past a rock or a bit of dried grass. Not because you've forgotten, but because remembering hurts in a way that has no direction. There's nothing to do with it. No ritual to repeat, no comfort to reach for. The grief was buried with the body, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's just deeper than the grave itself. Others walk past without noticing, or they notice and say nothing. That too is easier. You all know what lies there. No one needs to name it anymore. You've done it more than once, more than you can count, if you're honest. The digging, the covering, the walking away. You've wrapped bodies in cloth, in cloaks, in mats. You've placed stones with hands that could barely close from the cold. You've said words you didn't believe, or no words at all. The first time you thought you would never forget the shape of the mound. The curve of the earth you pressed flat with your palm. But now the graves blur together. You can't name them all. You can't carry them all, so you carry none. Or maybe you carry them in silence, in the stiffness of your spine, in the way your hands still ache when you touch dry soil. You've stopped imagining what lies beneath. It doesn't help. They're gone. You remain. And that's the hardest part. The remaining. The walking past. The way your legs move despite the weight. You think about turning your head sometimes. Just one glance, just enough to say, I remember. But you don't. You keep your gaze forward, your feet steady. Not because you don't care, but because it's the only way to keep going. You've learned that looking back doesn't bring anyone with you. It only slows you down. And there's no time for that. The camp moves. The cloud drifts. The sun burns. You pass the grave and breathe evenly, not to be cold, but to survive. This is what survival looks like now. A trail of unmarked places, a heart too full for language, and a body that keeps walking, even when part of it wants to kneel. There are days when you don't hear your name at all, not once, not from your family, not from those you walk beside, not even from your own mouth. It floats somewhere behind you, like something tied to your back with an old piece of string, too small to notice, too worn to feel. When you try to say it to yourself, it arrives slowly. The syllables feel dry, almost foreign. You whisper it once just to remember how it sounds, how it fits in your mouth. And still, something in you wonders if it's really yours anymore. The desert has taken so many things: your sense of time, your hunger, your place in the world. Maybe your name is next. Maybe it already is. And yet it's still there. Not loud, not certain, just present, like a pebble in your sandal you've stopped trying to remove. You hear others forget names too. Someone calls out for a brother who died years ago. A child answers to a name that isn't hers, because her mother liked the sound better. Elders sometimes pause before speaking, as if searching through fog. No one corrects anyone. You learn to respond to a look, to a gesture, to a need, not to a name. You learn to move without being called. You learn to disappear without being missed. And yet your name, whatever remains of it, still flickers like a dying light somewhere inside. You guard it, even when you stop using it. Not because it has power, but because it's yours. It may be the only thing that is. You've changed clothes. You've lost language. You've forgotten prayers. But the name, your name, still clings to the part of you that hasn't given up. Sometimes you wonder where it came from, who gave it to you, what it meant, if it meant anything at all. Was it chosen? Was it passed down? You try to remember the voice that first spoke it into the world. A mother's, a father's, someone older who's now buried beneath shifting sand. You don't know. The memory doesn't come. Only the name remains. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it doesn't matter where it came from, only that it hasn't left. It anchors you in a world that no longer recognizes the person you were. You hold on to it not because you need to be seen, but because you need to remember that once, before all this, you were someone. You had a place, a role, a voice. You weren't just part of a moving mass. You were a person with a name. Now, as you walk through the sameness of each day, you say it under your breath like a secret. Not often, not with force. Just enough to know it still answers. You don't share it easily. You don't offer it when asked. Some names are loud, still shouted across the camp, still carved into songs and stories. But yours has grown quiet. It rests in the space between silence and breath. You carry it like a coal cupped in your hand, fragile, fading, but warm. And maybe one day, when the walking stops, when the dust settles and the world grows still, you'll speak it aloud again. Maybe you'll give it to someone who will remember it. But until then, it is yours alone. A quiet truth in a loud world. A single thread through 40 years of forgetting. A name, barely yours, but still yours. The sky turns darker, but that does not mean it's night. Not really. It only means the sun has stopped pressing against your skin. Now, the cold takes its turn. You feel it slipping into your bones before your body even lies down. There is no ceremony to it, no comfort, just a slow collapse onto ground that has never softened. You curl around yourself or stretch long, or bury your face into a folded cloth. None of it helps. You close your eyes not because you are tired, though you are, but because it's what's next. You listen to the quiet, if it comes, to the coughing, to the shifting of limbs nearby, to the long silence after someone fails to make a sound. You do not pray. You do not hope. You only try to drift far enough inside yourself that the outside fades, even if only a little. Rest does not come, not in the way you remember it. You doze in fragments. Moments. A blink longer than usual. Then a sound brings you back. The snap of wind against fabric. The murmur of someone breathing too loudly. A cry that no one answers. Your body sleeps in pieces, none of which belong to peace. Dreams, when they come, are tangled. A fig tree. A river. A face you once knew. Then the sand is in your mouth, and it is not a dream anymore. You shift again. Your back protests. Your legs ache in strange rhythms. There is never warmth, not really. The fire burns, yes, but only to remind you of what it cannot give. You draw your shawl tighter, and it does nothing. You are not cold. You are beyond cold. You are simply aware of the absence of heat, the way one is aware of pain after it has dulled. The worst part is not the cold, or the aching, or even the dreams. It's the knowing. Knowing that this is not the end of something, but the pause before its repetition. Tomorrow will be the same. Tomorrow will demand your feet, your hands, your silence. You will rise not because you have rested, but because everyone else is rising. You will walk because the dust begins to rise ahead of you, and the cloud has already shifted. There is no renewal in sleep, no soft line between days. You do not sleep to recover. You sleep because your body no longer asks for permission. Because if you didn't lie down, you might fall standing. The body knows how to conserve, how to surrender without pride, how to keep moving with nothing left. You've learned this too. And yet somehow, you still call it sleep. Not because it feels like rest, but because there is no better word for what happens in those hours. You lie down, you go still, you rise again. That is enough. That is what passes for rest in this long procession. Some say the body adapts, that the muscles learn to forget pain, that sleep comes easier the more you abandon the idea of comfort. Perhaps. Or perhaps this is simply what endurance looks like. Eyes closed without peace, breath steady without calm, a night passed without dreams that mean anything. You do not ask for more. You do not imagine more. You only wait for the light to return, not because it brings hope, but because it means the waiting is over. And then, once more, you rise. You were told it was freedom, that leaving was a triumph, a breaking of chains. But as the days stretch into years, and the years forget their names, you begin to wonder. Not aloud, of course. That would be dangerous. But inside where no one can hear. You think of those who stayed behind, those who never stepped into the dust, who never watched the horizon for a land that refuses to appear. Yes, they were slaves. Yes, they worked under whips. But they ate. They drank. They slept under roofs. They had a rhythm even if it was cruel. You remember the smell of bread, the shadows on walls, the certainty of water. You remember even the sound of shouting masters, because at least the shouting meant someone knew you were there. Now, the silence is different. It doesn't notice you. It just passes through you, like wind over stone. You tell yourself you shouldn't think this way, that looking back is what doomed others, that nostalgia is a kind of poison. But the memories don't feel poisonous. They feel warm, soft around the edges. In your mind, Egypt becomes something else. Not paradise, but structure. You knew where the next day would take you. You didn't have to guess how far you'd walk, or whether the sky would give you shade or fire. You didn't lie awake counting the ribs beneath your skin. You didn't bury your friends in shallow graves with no markers. You may have been owned, but at least you were seen. Here, you are free. Free to wander, free to hunger, free to be forgotten in the dust. It's a freedom that feels like falling through air that never catches you. You hear others whisper it too when they think no one listens. They speak of garlic, onions, cucumbers. Their voices crack as if saying the names brings back the taste. They remember laughter, even if it was rare. They remember voices they've never heard again. They remember their children not coughing. They remember songs that were sung in houses, not beside fires that give no warmth. And you realize something you never dared admit. You don't miss Egypt. You miss who you were in Egypt. Someone who knew their place, however bitter it was. Someone whose suffering had borders. Now the suffering is open-ended. There's no gate, no end. Just endless sky and the ache in your feet. You used to pray for deliverance. Now you wonder if deliverance was just a new kind of exile. Still, you walk. You carry the burden of the choice you didn't make. You follow the ones who say they know where you're going. You don't speak of your envy. It would sound like betrayal. But in the stillness, when the fire dies down and the camp goes quiet, it finds you. Not anger, not even regret. Just a soft, gnawing ache for the things that used to be certain. A loaf of bread, a wall to lean against, a name that someone called with purpose. You wonder if the ones who stayed behind still think of you, if they tell stories of the ones who left, if they imagine you walking into glory, if they envy you. And you wonder quietly if maybe both of you were wrong, if no one chose well, if all that ever really existed was the walking and the remembering. You don't remember when the walking stopped being a choice. Perhaps it never was. Perhaps your first step out of Egypt was already the beginning of something that could not be paused. You walk not because you believe, not because someone told you to, not even because you fear what happens if you stop. You walk because everyone else does, because the motion itself has become a kind of sasons, a ritual with no priest, no reason, no end. The feet in front of you move. The dust rises. You follow. Sometimes your mind drifts toward what was, toward what might be, but your legs don't. They obey. They move with the others. There is no ceremony to it. No drum, no shout. Just the slow, constant sound of sandals against stone. Still, you walk. Some days you wonder if anyone else feels it. The blankness behind the motion. The way your body continues forward even when your thoughts have stopped trying to make sense of it. You watch the older ones limp, the younger ones stumble, and no one stops. Not really. Not for long. Even grief walks. Even doubt walks. The strong help the weak sometimes. But more often, the weak simply walk slower until they don't, and the path grows quiet behind them. You've seen it happen. You've helped dig the shallow holes. You've looked away when others did, and then you moved on. Still, you walk. There is no applause, no recognition, no promise, just a trail behind you and another day ahead. The land does not change much. It shifts, yes, rocks to sand to thorn, but it never welcomes. You pass the same sky each day, the same wind, the same brittle stars at night. Even the divine signs, the cloud and the fire, feel like part of the rhythm now. They move. So you move. Sometimes it feels like obedience. Sometimes it feels like surrender. But most often, it just feels like inertia. The weight of going forward because standing still would require an explanation. And no one is asking for explanations anymore. The questions have gone quiet. The voices that once sang now murmur or fall silent altogether. The camp sleeps lightly, rises slowly, and still, it walks. And maybe that's what endurance really is. Not strength, not hope. Just this, the quiet step after the last one. The breath that doesn't ask why. The hand that grips the strap of your pack because it's what you've always done. You walk not because you are certain of anything, but because it is what remains. After the miracles, after the doubts, after the mourning and the forgetting, after the songs and the silences. Still, you walk. Not alone, not with joy, not with clarity, just with the others, one foot ahead of the next, beneath the same sun, toward a place no one can describe, at a pace no one questions. And that, for now, is enough. And so the story fades, not with triumph, not with revelation, but with motion. The dust settles behind you, the stars rise ahead. You do not know if you are closer, only that you are not where you began. And maybe that is the only miracle left. Now, close your eyes. Let the weight drift from your shoulders. You are not alone.